Hi, Siri. I'm looking for a new podcast, one that preferably is hosted by a UF Hall of Famer, one that airs every weekday that would bring me everything I need to know about the Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions. Siri, is there such a show?
Have you heard of PodUp with Matthews in the morning on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or any podcast platform?
Oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that? UF Hall of Famer Shane Matthews has a show every weekday. I'm gonna go check it out tomorrow. Thanks, Siri.
Hey, baby, just who you wanted to see on this Wednesday morning. PodUp with Matthews in the morning. I'm the backup QB. Seth Harp on Sports, ESPN Gainesville, Director of Programming. With you over the course of the next 60 minutes. My right-hand man, how shall we say it? The Travis Kelce to my Patrick Mahomes, Edgar Thompson waiting in the wings. Reminder, everyone involved, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, coming to you live from the Crime Prevention System Studios, large enough to serve you and small enough to care. Got any questions for us? You can fire away via, variety of factors. YouTube questions, courtesy of Quality Plumbing. Residential and commercial plumbing services and emergency repair since 1984. Their name says it all. Facebook Live questions. Hit us up, courtesy of Meldon Law, the only official injury accident law firm partner of the Florida Gators. And also, of course, you have that Titan MRI text line available to you at 352-353-7465. That's 353-7465. Again, that's the Titan MRI hotline. Okay. Let's see here. We got so much stuff we can start with. I've always said this, and Edgar is an old school Walter Cronkite. How do we want to say? Byline, Mike Lupica, salt of the earth man knows that there's no such thing as slow news days, just slow news people. And we have in front of you now a Gator basketball, basically bye week until we get to the weekend. Stories circulating, golden cleared, everything that we have looked into this week. And Edgar, here we are, and welcome in. I know you and I haven't done this for, a couple of months here. Good to talk to you again. And I sit here at late January and say this with the utmost confidence, that the investigation, everything that was taking place over the course of the last 6 to 8 weeks, if it affected this basketball program, it didn't show signs of it, because they're playing just as good, if not better, than anyone in the nation right now. Edgar Thompson, welcome in.
I tell you, Travis Kelce and Walter Cronkite, pretty high praise.
Compliments are flowing.
So it's amazing the ability they've shown to compartmentalize all that, because it could have been a huge distraction, the Gators. And it occasionally would come up, like when they lost to Missouri at home. Somebody's telling me, oh yeah, the kids are distracted or something. They just had a slow start in that game, I think. I think we can say now. Look what they did to Mike White the other day. If that didn't, I don't think there were any people thinking the Gators had been better off with Mike White than Todd Golden, but anyone who was, that thought was put to rest then. That was a thorough beating. I felt almost bad for Mike, having dealt with him for all the years I did. But, this team's rolling, man. We're going to find out a lot the next 2 weeks about this team. And I don't know that it'll really state anything definitively one way or the other. Well, it won't state anything definitively that maybe it's not as good as we thought. But if they can go on the road at Tennessee this week, host Vanderbilt Tuesday. Vanderbilt's 24th in the nation right now.
They're playing well.
Then go to Auburn on the 8th, a week from Saturday, and then Mississippi State on the 11th, and come out of that like 3-1, let's say, even split, but 3-1, much less sweep. You're talking this team is seriously could be a contender for the whole thing, really. I mean, that is a stretch, man. I mean, number, 8, I think, Tennessee now, number 1, Auburn, number 24, Vandy, as I mentioned, number 14, Mississippi State. I mean, the SEC is just unrelenting. 7 of the top 14 teams, 10 of the top 24, if with Vandy being the 10th, could have as many as like 11, 12, 13 bids to the tournament. And the Gators could, I'm not saying could be the class of it, but they got a chance to prove that they might be the best team in the league. And it wouldn't stun me if they were, based on the fact they have the best backcourt potential in the nation. I don't know the lay of the land well enough to state that, but find me a better trio of guards. And then they do have a pretty good inside game that is a little less consistent. But when it's on, it's on. And when they're on, they're almost impossible to keep up with.
And you look, and it's the deepest conference, Edgar, maybe ever. And hyperbole aside, and good God, what are there, 8 teams in the top 18 or 9, whatever it is right now?
I said 7 in the top 14.
7 in the top 14. You asked Vanderbilt and the other guys backing into the back edge of the top 25, and just think about that when I know that, AP polls and, the RPI, it's no bearing on what Selection Sunday looks like. But under that logic, what does that tell you? That tells you you're going to have multiple 1s, maybe multiple 2s, maybe multiple 3s or multiple 4 seeds in the NCAA tournament. And that's remarkable. And I watch this, and you watch this team, and look, the way that they've played this year, they can play with anybody. They haven't had that, they had a little bit of a dud against South Carolina, but they found a way to win. That happens in conference play, midweek games on the road. And, I keep hearing after, the Golden thing gets, or the Title IX thing rolls off the books, at least here a little bit, from Florida's perspective, that the structure of this going forward, it's been like, well, they've had this distraction and now this distraction's gone. For the people playing that card, I'm like, okay, well, maybe the edge is gone then. If you want to play that game that the world's against us, it's us against the world. Well, that kind of goes away a little bit now. If you want to play the other side of the pendulum. So it's one thing to play with a little pressure on you, Edgar, as you know. It's another thing to play carefree. But if the golden cloud is no longer there, what does that do edge-wise? What does that do focus-wise? They've had a whole week to get ready for Tennessee, and you're right. A Tennessee team that, let's face it, you embarrassed them. And embarrassed them in a fashion that no number 1 ranked team has ever been embarrassed in the history of college basketball. So Saturday is going to be hostile. Saturday is going to be early. Saturday is going to be intense. And you're right. If you can go in there and dump them in their gym, then you're Florida and you're looking around, and with the schedule that Alabama has, with the schedule that Auburn has, Edgar, you have to start to feel, don't you, that this is the best crack that this team has had, and maybe the best team that they have had since Corey Brewer and Joakim Noah were running up and down the court?
It definitely seems that I covered that first one. Well, I covered both. I just didn't cover the tournament run with the other. I ended up moving to South Florida for other responsibilities at the Palm Beach Post. And I said I didn't cover the 2007 tournament, but I was around that team for, a long time. And this backcourt, there'd be some interesting matchups, for sure. I'd like to see Corey Brewer and Elijah Martin going at it, for example. The 2014 team, it might be Brewer and Richard, but you never know. But that inside game with Noah and Horford, the shot blocking and rebounding. I mean, Noah was an elite shot blocker and Horford was an elite rebounder. They'd be tough. But the 14 team that won, what was it, 30 in a row? And I mean, God, what were they, like 35-2 when they lost to UConn in the Final Four? And when Wilbekin, something happened early in the game, he got cramps or something with his knee or whatever. He was a stud. I tell you, he and Walter Clayton would be a matchup. That offensive skill of Clayton against that harassing defense of Wilbekin, who's as good a defensive guard as you'll ever see. I mean, at the college level, he was unbelievable. I think this team's probably better than that team. And so I don't know, but it's still got stuff to prove. I don't, the kids, did they really have a chip on their shoulders because of what their coach was going through? Perhaps. They haven't really talked about it. We've kind of steered clear of the topic with them. I mean, what are they going to say? You're putting them in an uncomfortable position. Todd made a couple of statements along the way. I think the feeling was this thing was over in October, and then it gets out in early November, and then became what it became. But this was a 4-month process, and Todd's the one who has to feel like the weight of the world's lifted off his shoulders, because it's, omnipresent for him. So we'll see how it goes, man. I'm not gonna, read much into it. But you could create narratives if it had continued when it was going on, and they didn't show up, for example, for a game like you thought they might, the Gators, and you're like, maybe this is starting to become a distraction. Well, that's kind of no longer really a fact.
You are formerly an Orlando man. You write for the Orlando Sentinel. Magic are having a great year. I bring this up because you would maybe hear these whispers just from the people that that, his style and the way he runs a team is very similar to what NBA teams want now. And I only bring this up is this man, is Todd Golden a type of guy that fits in at the next level, Edgar? And, you sit here and, oh my gosh, he could lose his job. Now he's staying. And now Harp's here saying the NBA. I just, you look around at certain teams and certain organizations that want that young, new look, right? That fresh. In NBA coaches, let's face it, Edgar, get spit out seems like 15, 20 games over the course of each season. So the reason I ask that is, is Todd Golden the type of guy, at least his style, that you see being a concern for Scott Strickland in terms of keeping him here long-term with the NBA Hawks howling, if you will?
Oh, it could be the college Hawks. Look, this guy has been put through the ringer. It's a small community, and maybe he's just like, man, this was a rough ride, and if something did come up, he were to look or were to consider, that maybe he wouldn't have before. But they have him under contract till 29-30, gave him $1 million raise a year ago. UF's stepped up. And maybe it steps up again and says, hey, we're going to give them even more if they have a huge year, and we're going to lock this guy in for sure. So he won't, he realizes that we got his back. But I'll tell you this, they had his back, the UAA, university, and then his lawyer came out guns blazing. And Todd had a statement himself. I've never been around a story that had 4 statements come out after it. But this was an unprecedented story in many ways too. I don't know about the NBA. I don't know if that's his thing. I mean, it was, if he's that just purely basketball guy like Billy Donovan was, who loves the 82 games. It's a grind, man. I'm not saying that Todd doesn't like that or want that. He's 39 years old. He's young. He's got going to have plenty of options, but maybe he prefers the college game. I have never asked him that. But I will say that when, you go through the ringer for 4 months like this, and a process like this, and a community like this, he's going to be guilty in the court of public opinion forever with some people, or at least suspicions of guilt, right? Reputational harm, potentially. I mean, this doesn't just go away because a ruling occurred. Not everybody's paying attention to news 24/7 either. There are people that maybe are just finding out, or maybe still don't know that it's been ruled upon. right? We're just clued in every minute to stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Let's just see how the season plays out. But man, this team makes a Final Four or whatever. He's going to be a hot commodity. And UF is probably going to have to step up with another raise.
Yeah. Yeah, you look, and the reason I bring this up, and Edgar, where I grew up, my home state, maybe looking for a basketball coach again, and that's Indiana. And all of a sudden you may sit there and say, well, he would never leave Florida for Indiana. Edgar, I've learned in my life, you put enough commas in a paycheck, people pretty much do anything. And I mean, I didn't think Bill Belichick would be the next head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. I didn't think Pete Carroll would be the next head coach of the Raiders. You can go up and down the list. I mean, anybody 3 years ago see Rick Pitino being the head coach at St. John's? So you just don't know when it comes to these things. And again, everybody, Todd, the job that they have done on the court, they are, I told you, going back and forth over the course of this season, they have a Final Four pedigree. But there's one thing that I'm going to ask you about, that if there's a hole in that armor, or you know what I mean, if there's any sort of weak link, I'm going to ask you about this, because I think this is actually a big concern. PodUp with Matthews in the morning is brought to you in part by Comfort Temp Heating and Air, your number one local HVAC company, professional and experienced technicians keeping you informed throughout the entire process. Check them out at comforttemp.com. Again, that's comforttemp.com. Comfort Temp Heating and Air. And also, PodUp with Matthews in the morning is a service of Silverback Concrete. Silverback Concrete, firm foundations for generations. You stand on it. They stand by it. Edgar, if there's any concern, or at least things that I would sit there and go, that's going to be an issue, is they're not very deep. And, at times in the tournament, you can get away with it. 2 years ago, Purdue wasn't very deep. They got burned. Last year, they were able to go 8-9 deep, and they had a little bit more success. Now, it makes a difference when you have a 7'3" monster in the middle, right? When it comes to that. But Edgar, if I was going to point to one thing that I'd say, it's what happens if one of those guys in the front court get in foul trouble. If they get into an overtime situation, if they get into a team that's got 3 guards that just wants to go up and down, or 4 guards up and down, like some of these small mid-majors like to do in the NCAA tournament. If I had to point to one thing, question mark, it would be the depth. And can you go 8, 9, 10 in a 40-minute game on a Sunday heading into the Sweet 16?
I mean, they're 8 deep when you go to, Aberdeen, Hauk, Alexis, who probably needs to pick it up at times, but he's a pretty skilled guy and pretty good player. I mean, can Isaiah Brown play more? He's a heck of a shooter, Orlando freshman. But yes, I mean, maybe, but yeah, you're talking about going up and down the floor. I don't know that you want to put, this team can go. I mean,
True.
With Martin, Clayton, and Richard, I mean, this team can run you off the court fast. I mean, that game the other day against Georgia was like just an assault. I mean, and Richard's hitting 3 straight threes. When he's cooking, and you got Clayton and Martin, and then Condon is very skilled and plays very hard. Now, he got pushed around a little bit at Kentucky, and Missouri had 2 really big bigs, and they were physical, and they lost that game by a point. It was really like 4 points. It was a 3-pointer that the buzzer basically by Martin. And Hauk's scrappy, but got in foul trouble that game. I mean, he had like 4 fouls like in 5 minutes or whatever. And so stuff can happen, and Chignello has been a little bit ineffective recently, but I think he's still got tons of upside, Chignello. So, I mean, I like the team, man. I think they got depth. I mean, Aberdeen's been effective off the bench. I mean, he likes to dribble a lot, but he's pretty effective guy, and he defends really hard.
Yeah.
So it's a nice team, man. And it's gonna be a fun on February to see what it can do against his schedule. I was looking at the net rankings, which has replaced RPI a few years back. They're 13 out of the top 46 are SEC teams, Oklahoma being 46, and they come here on February 18th. So it is just absolutely just a murderer's row in the SEC, man.
Yeah, it's funny. It's more dominant. It's a more dominant season for this conference as of right now, as we hit February, than it ever was in football. In terms of the top 25, football had times 5 of the top 10 or 8 of the top 19 or whatever. But basketball, what we are right now today, as we get ready to, like I said, hit the final weekend in January, it's the strongest this conference has ever been in any sport ever, with maybe the exception of baseball.
I'll say one last thing before you gotta throw me out of here. This goes back to Mike Slive, okay, the legendary commissioner who really put the SEC on a different trajectory. He came in and went to clean up the league's reputation, for one, in terms of it's all the probations and all that stuff. And it was a football league, but it was always every school was always getting in trouble. So he got, not that there are any rules now, I know you can get in trouble, but he made a point to try to clean that up. He was very involved with the the playoff and the BCS. He behind the scene, he died a while back now, but so he wasn't there, but when it came to fruition. But another big thing with him was, let's get basketball going, because it's not where it should be at the SEC level. And back in about 2011, 12, 13, Mike Tranchese, the former Big East commissioner, got him involved. There were 2 or 3 teams that had qualified for the tournament, consistently for a while. And he was like, we got to get basketball back up by scheduling better non-conference, just build this part of the league up, and look at it now. So another legacy, more for Mike Slive's legacy that people should probably remember now.
PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Edgar Thompson, Seth Harp with you here on this Wednesday. Quick question coming in from Edgar, and I actually know the answer to this. Do you think Micah Hanglotten gets on the court this year?
Well, that's an X factor we just didn't even talk about. And he's practicing. I was over there yesterday for working on a story, and he's practicing. I saw him scrimmage a month ago. I was sitting down with Todd at the O-Dome doing a story on how he builds a roster. He was going all out. So he can play.
He can play today if he wants to. Yes.
And so he would have 11 games and then postseason, and you're talking 15 plus games easily. He could still play. Does he want to burn a redshirt year? He just turned 21. I mean, is he really going to stay for 2 full years? I mean, he's 7-1. I'm not saying he's ready to jump to the NBA, but does he want to get on the train, for the ride this thing into late March and early April potentially, and he could help. So gives you a lot of flexibility that you might want.
Yeah, and that's a question. You're right, Edgar. And everybody always, and we run into this in college situations. Everybody, you should stay in college. You should stay in college. You should get the most out of your college experience. You're right. Is it worth it for his career to come back, let's say for just 15 games, and then you burn an entire year, then you only have 1 year left? And do you need him right now? The thing is, the moral of the story is this, and then there were reports last week that he was going to play. He can play. He could walk out there right now and play a basketball game. This Saturday he could play. The question is, and this is a decision that's internally, is it worth burning his junior year or to do it? Is it worth it? And the fans don't give a damn at the end of the day about his, oh yeah, I want to win the game, get him out there and play. He's been cleared. But life's a little bit deeper than that, and you have to worry about your concerns. And I give the school credit too. I'll give the university, because in Todd Golden's, it's like, man, we want to handle this situation delicately. The last thing I want to do is shove him out there. He twerks a calf or something like that, and we've got a mess on our hands. Let's just make sure he's cleared 100%, and he can go out there and practice. But risk worth the reward. at this point. And I've always said this, you know, people are awful cavalier with other people's lives. So hey, it's his call.
He's been cleared though.
Yeah,
and
it's
he
his call.
could play. And anything could happen. I think the leg's sound, biology. I mean, look, dude, I seriously watched him practicing his ass. I mean, he was jumping over the scorer's table for a loose ball that I was sitting at with Todd on the end of the court. He could play.
Yes, he
But
can.
it's a matter of if you want to like play half a season and how quickly can you get in game shape. Because you get out there, man, and the adrenaline's flowing and all that. You get tired a lot more quickly than when you're practicing with your with your teammates and the familiarity. But they could use them, and if you can, but it's going to complicate the rotation a bit. But when you got guys that are getting in foul trouble in Houck's case or Chignello, who's suddenly not producing like you need them to, it gives you another option. So we'll see. I mean, like Todd said, you know, he had second thoughts. This was going to happen Friday night. This was going to happen. And then he had second thoughts, and Todd's like, hey, look, he could wake up and say, hey, I want to play at Tennessee. So still a few days till that game.
And my analogy that Edgar still ride to this day, you can either have a pet pig or a bacon sandwich. You can't have both. And he either is going to burn your eligibility or not. And once you fire that ignition, the car starts. So there you go. Hey, man, thanks for hopping on this morning. Good to see you.
Sure.
Yeah, you're going to the Super Bowl, aren't you?
No.
You got the Orlando Sentinel not sending you?
No, man. I actually have the LPGA opens its season in Orlando. I'll probably be there Sunday for the final round. But I got Daytona the week after that. Yeah. So they got me doing Florida events.
You're not covering the Grammys?
No.
Okay.
I wouldn't even want to cover that, but I don't even know what the music would be, right?
I like the artists featuring, and they run the list now. I'm like, I'm old. I don't know any of them.
They're all talented, but I don't know any of them.
Yeah.
But okay, man. Hey, I appreciate it, Seth.
All right. See you, Edgar. There you go. Edgar Thompson, Orlando Sentinel. We're at halftime here. PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Coming up next, he is the voice of Gator softball. He is the voice of Gator soccer. He is the voice of Gator women's basketball. And pretty much every sport that you can think of. The only sport that I'm not sure if he knows how to do or not is cricket. I'll ask him. And who is him? He is Kyle Crooks, and he's next. We roll on. Seth Harp for Shane Matthews on this Wednesday edition of PodUp with Matthews in the morning.
Our premium sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union,
International Diamond Center,
Meldon Law, QC Kinetics, Dave & Buster's, UF Health Orthopedics and Sports Medicine Institute, JF Hayden Craft Liqueurs, Bishop's Pitmaster Barbecue, Florida Cracker Kitchen, Los Linderos Tequila. Gridiron sponsors are Baker Sporting Goods, Cogent Bank, Comfort Temp, Electronics World, Florida Victorious, Gallo Car Wash, Miapa Latin Cafe, Peachland Dental, Quality Plumbing, Ruse Ogre State Farm, Silverback Concrete, 84 Lumber, Big Mills Cheesesteak, Celebrate Primary Care, Dowling Signs, Gator Bait Media, Gator Dominoes, Ironwood Golf Course, Okido America, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, UF Bookstores, Nest and Wow, MG&A Wealth Management. Watch and listen to us live on Facebook and YouTube. Listen to the podcast whenever on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. To become a sponsor, call my man Freddie at 352-284-3733.
Naysayers. Setbacks. Injuries. Life throws a lot of hurdles your way. The key is just keep jumping them.
Continuing on this Wednesday edition of PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Seth Harp on sports. Kyle Crooks going to be speaking and joining us here momentarily. PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Service of QC Kinetics for long-lasting relief, no surgery, drugs, or downtime. Schedule your free consultation at QC Kinetics today. PodUp with Matthews in the morning, coming to you live from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. You got a question for myself or for Kyle? Fire away. Quality Plumbing on YouTube is the proud sponsor of the YouTube broadcast of PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Quality Plumbing, commercial, residential services, emergency repair for 41 years. The name says it all. And of course, Meldon Law on Facebook, the only official injury and accident law firm partner of the Florida Gators. Kyle Crooks joining us here on PodUp with Matthews in the morning. And Kyle, I know you got a lot going on, but I know there is something that you wanted to do before we get started, and that was go down your predictions for the Grammy Awards coming up on CBS. So I'll just let you know. I know I'm not do Happy New Year the last week of January, but it's the first time you and I have been together on this sucker in 2025. Here we are, man. We got basketball teams going in opposite directions. And you, my friend, are less than 10 days away from softball beginning. I guess we all are with what do we have? A 2 p.m. First pitch next Friday on WRU ESPN Gainesville, of course. So Kyle, welcome in. And I know your slate's about to get pretty Joe DiMaggio-esque in terms of daily streaks of broadcasting.
Yeah, it's and for you guys back at the station, it ain't much easier. It's baseball's about to start up, but softball, women's basketball, it's every single day. And the interesting part about softball is it's every day, but it's a different opponent, and you get double headers in the mix. So it's a little bit different than baseball in terms of how tough the early portion of the season could be. I would enjoy, and I'll talk to Tim Walton today a little bit later. I would enjoy. Let's do some 3-game series to start the year. We don't have to play everybody under the sun, every Division I team under the sun, because that just adds to more preparation time. But I'm excited for it because certain polls have softball preseason number 1. A lot of Oklahoma fans would argue you got to beat us first, right? They lost everybody from their 4 straight national championships, so that's why Oklahoma is not number 1. Texas went to the Champ Series last year; they're right up there. So and they're all in the SEC now, right? So Texas and Oklahoma are going to come here to KDC Presley Stadium. Texas to start SEC play, the home slate, and then Oklahoma to end it. So you bookend it with 2 of the best in the country, but the top 3 are Texas, Florida, Oklahoma. They'll all play each other this year. The SEC tournament should be fun, and the expectation for this group is to get that 3rd national championship. It's a balanced team. It's a deeper team in terms of pitching. And boy, they were really close last year with the team they had of getting to the Champ Series behind Keegan Rothrock. So I'm excited for it. Excited for the rest of this basketball season with the men on the men's side, just how well they've been playing, and hopefully the women can get it turned around starting tomorrow. I'll be on the TV side when they play Vanderbilt.
We're going to talk about women's basketball coming up here, and I got a couple questions for you when it comes to the men's team as well. But with the softball team where they are, this is the best shot Tim's had to win a national championship since he won it, correct?
Yeah, probably 2016, the year after, going for a three-peat was a very good team. They lost to Georgia in the Super Regionals, but I'll ask him that question today, but I think it's right up there. It's one of those teams that's right up there.
Yeah. Women's hoops. Question from Andy rolling in, asking about O'Neal developing into a first-team All-SEC player eventually. It's an interesting thing, Kyle, because, new players in, new players out. Kelly, you look at it at the beginning of the year like, oh my God, this roster is better than the roster last year. And then you look at it the next year, it's like, oh my gosh, this roster is better than the roster the year before. And then, okay, we've got all this new young talent. But yet, Kyle, when I'm working over the weekend and I'm listening to you call games, I'm like, yeah, but they're still down 15 points going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Well, what is it, man?
It's youth part of it. When your point guard is Liv McGill, is one of the best guards in the SEC, but she's a freshman. Layla Reynolds, who plays the point guard, is a sophomore. Miara O'Neal, who he had asked about developing into an all SEC player. Like, for her, she's going to take a little bit. Like, she lives a lot on the outside for a forward. She can shoot it. She hasn't shot it well this year, but she can shoot it. She can stretch it. I think she's just got to get a little bit more comfortable playing more minutes. First go around in the SEC. Liv McGill, who I mentioned before, she's got the most turnovers in the SEC, and part of that is just forcing things, trying to make things happen. She's so next level in the passes that she could throw that sometimes her teammates aren't expecting them, and they sail out of bounds or go off their fingertips out of bounds. There is a lot of talent here for sure. They can win games. We know that. It's just the turnovers, man. I was looking last night, last 3 games, we have almost 80 turnovers total. I ain't going to win you games, especially with the SEC, and Vanderbilt's a team that turns you over. So Thursday is going to be a similar task. You got to find a way to one-hit shots, but not give the ball away. I mean, you could shoot nearly 50%, but if your opponent's getting 15 more shots a game, that's an issue. So look, I think youth plays a huge factor in this. Transfer portal hasn't been big for women's basketball. We only had one transfer come in who was somebody who was just looking for more playing time, and Lex Gassett from Louisville. And, that takes a significant investment, I think, for the transfer portal. There's a lot of schools that are paying a decent amount for these players to come play there, and getting some NIL deals to play for them. So I think that could be part of it too. I think you gotta pay to enter the arena to be competitive in the SEC with bringing in. Player acquisition is big. It was never meant to be that way, Seth, right?
Yeah.
Pay for play in the NIL, but that's what it is. We know it in football. We know it in men's basketball. It's all the same, man.
Only if there was a way to stop that, making them employees and have them sign contracts. But
well, next year that's the deal, right? But they're also still going to get the NIL, which I'm all for, and that's great. They're all going to make a salary, and we'll see how that all works out. But money's got to come from somewhere. So who knows? Maybe I won't have a job next year. I don't know how that's going to work.
I've said this: if the school's worried about paying them, Kyle, I've offered this up, and if Scott and everybody else at the SEC, all the commissioners and ADs want to pull me in, just create a Monday night SEC football game on Amazon that starts at 6:30 p.m. Those contracts, singular game like that for Amazon, Netflix are going for about $500 million. Kyle, a year, $400 million for the entire SEC will mean for NIL money. Game over. But no time for rational solutions. Let's just complain about it on Twitter or X. I'm sorry, I don't want to be misinformed.
Yeah.
Kyle Crooks with us here on PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Of course, we talk about softball starting 9 days from today, and women's hoops in action as well. Men's hoops, you call games for men's hoops too. And I watched this team, and I was talking with Edgar Thompson about this earlier. It's the best team that's played here since a decade ago, at least. It's to me, watching it, it's the best team that I've seen since they won the national title with Noah and Brewer and that clan. I do wonder if they get themselves into a situation, depth in the front court, if you're going to find a flaw, and there's a flaw with everybody, right? The flaw with UConn last year, even though they beat everybody like a pulp at times, but the flaw with them was, can those big men cover an open space? And the answer was yes. They struggled against Purdue, but they lost to Creighton. They had losses in there. This Florida team is Final Four worthy. If this team doesn't go to the Sweet 16, it'll be a major disappointment, at least from this perspective. Kyle, you sit here and they're tied for third in the conference. Tennessee this weekend, the Golden investigation from Florida's perspectives in the rearview mirror. From what you've seen, this team, stack them up to me of teams that they haven't played on the national scope. Kyle, how do you stack them up against Duke? How do you stack them up against Auburn? I know Iowa State got beat the other night, but how do you stack them up against the Cyclones?
Yeah, I was watching Duke the other night. I would stack them up against. I mean, NC State was right in that sucker for most of that game against Duke. Auburn's the best team in the league. They got the best player in the league, Janai Broom. Once he really gets healthy, I know he's back in the mix now. He played the other day against Tennessee. Auburn's the best team in the league, and Florida, I believe, goes there in 2 or 3 games. I think they go there and they're going to play at Auburn, so that'll be a giant test. I think. The cheat code and what we've always talked about in college basketball is experienced guards. In this case, Florida has 3 of them that have over 1,000 career points, over 100 career games, and Clayton, Richard, and Martin. And you have the Final Four experience of Elijah Martin. I think that the biggest difference in this team, as opposed to maybe years past that had some cachet about them, in the preseason, some of the Mike White teams, I can remember one of Mike White's teams was preseason number 6. I think Elijah Martin, man, he's an X factor to me. The way he defends, the way that he kind of puts his will on a game. It's just he's a dog. He's the way that's the way that the guys on the team describe him. He's just a dog. And then you have the scoring of Walter Clayton Jr. and then Will Richards having his best season in college by far. He's become a more well-rounded player. He can defend a little bit more. He can attack the rack. He's shooting. His shooting's kind of been up and down, but the way he took over that South Carolina game, Will Richard, to me that is just been such a difference for this team. And then. Defensively, I think the one thing that might bite this team is defense. Are they committed for a full 40 minutes? At times, we've seen this team revert to last year. They had a 90 defensive rating. This is a team that has the ceiling of being a top 15 defensive rating team. Do they revert back at times, taking possessions off defensively? Foul trouble and depth, all that's a lot of teams in the country that have depth issues. Whether Micah comes back or not, we'll see about that. But this team, just looking at it on paper and what I've seen so far, it's Final Four ready. But the tournament's all about matchups, Seth. You run into the wrong team, the wrong mid-major, the wrong Power 4 school that just you do not match up well against, and anything can happen. So you just don't know with how the brackets line up.
Yeah, and I was talking about this the other day. Like, this is the type of team, Kyle, that could go to the Final Four. It's also the type of team that could be a 3 seed and you run into 6 seed Creighton and get beat in the second round. If you run into a team that has impeccable guard play. So the strength and pedigree is there. It's almost like it's analogous, and you're not going to like it, gang. But it's almost like Georgia football. They can win any game that they play in, but this year they also proved that there's a little vulnerability there. This Florida team could go to the Final Four and also could get beaten. I think if you don't get into the second weekend, then you look around and go, oh my God, what happened here? Like softball wouldn't get to Oklahoma City. You'd be like, oh my God, what happened, man? I think that's kind of where the mindset is with all these things. Andy writing in, do you think Cooper Flagg will go down as the greatest one and done basketball player in NCAA history? That is a great question, but I think as long as Kevin Durant's alive, and I mean, again, it was my generation, but guys, Stephon Marbury
I was a Nets fan. I am a Nets fan, so I grew up with him as my point guard for many years.
That dude was guys, Anthony Davis. I mean,
you just look at Kentucky and run down guys, but Cooper Flagg, like I said, I watched him the other day, and the ability as a big to dribble, drive, assist, obviously score. I mean, he's the real deal. He's worth tanking.
Well, I think you'd agree with me. The Naismith Award's over, isn't it, Kyle?
Yeah, he's the
real deal. Yeah, a little bit. It's not like the Heisman where you got, well, maybe if this. No, no, no. Not going to happen. Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning is a service of Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and the surrounding areas. Also, Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning is a service of Electronics World, integration and design specialist for smart home automation and entertainment, affordable local installation service and support, electronicsworld.net. Okay, man. I know we got a little time here. We talked about men's basketball. Obviously, talked about softball. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little bit about where we are, NFL style, because Super Bowl is coming in a couple weeks, 11 days. Kyle, it's tough for me being a Chiefs fan.
Yeah, I know. I hate you. So
and let me explain why. Hold on for this segment. Hold on. Let me put on.
going for a repeat.
I want to put on my Chiefs hat I had in the 5th grade, Kyle, for this segment. All right, look at this. This is old
Still
school.
fits.
Yeah, but not really. I got the big melon now. Kyle, you know how difficult it is trying to plan a new parade route every year?
Yeah, you know what? I'm a Colts fan, so we're trying to figure out. Hopefully, Anthony Richardson, to Gator ties can help figure some things out, and we can figure some things out. Not that I embrace greatness. I'm not one of those that I hate. I hated the Patriots though because I was a Colts fan, so there was a direct link. Like I was Peyton for many years was the Josh Allen, right? He couldn't get past Tom Brady and playing in snowy Foxborough, and now Josh Allen, that hurdle is Patrick Mahomes. So I lived that Buffalo Bills fan life. That there's just this giant obstacle that sits in the way. But I embrace it. I love the greatness aspect of it because that's such an intriguing storyline for me. Can they go for 3 straight and Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley with the Eagles? Like to me, that's a great matchup.
Yeah.
It's a great game, So who am I going to pick right now? I don't know what the Vegas number is at the moment.
Look at this up. It's 1.5 right now. Chiefs 1.5.
So it's essentially almost a pick 'em.
Yeah.
It's and that tells you that they expect it to be a really great game. Rematch of the Super Bowl. Can you bet against Kansas City?
They can do it at your own peril, right? I mean,
it's like
betting gravity.
Betting against the Patriots or like back in their heyday, betting against Alabama in their heyday. You don't make money betting against those teams and franchises. Patrick Mahomes with the experience in the big game. Jalen Hurts does have that one game. Man, to me, like that's going to take a week of just thinking, tossing a coin and and picking.
It's amazing. And this is what I wanted to bring up with this in this day and age where you have a salary cap. That even with the salary cap in the NFL, the Patriots were able to have 2 different sets of dynasties. The Chiefs are having one right now. They are. A sport that is designed to be parity by nature. The worst team gets the first pick, and it's the sport that's churning out the most dynasties. Each sport, almost for the better part of a discussion, each decade has one, right? Last decade, it was the Warriors in basketball. The decade before, you probably make the case that it was the Spurs. You go the decade before, of course, the 90s was the Bulls, the 80s, Lakers, but I just look at this in the NFL, and now we have another one, and everybody, and I'm tired of this team. I've had it with this team. It sucks. They don't make 30 for 30s about one and dones, Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of these things that I was watching the Buffalo Bills 30 for 30 about 4 straight trips. And, I remember them. It's funny about this is as a kid, watching that team play, going to the Super Bowl. I remember they beat the Chiefs, the last one. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to. But it was never one of these things like I'm tired of the Bills. I look back on that 30 years later, and I wasn't tired of the Bills back then.
Mm-hmm.
I longed for that at times. Like, man, this was greatness. I did this a couple years ago when the Patriots were undefeated. I want to see them go undefeated and win the Super Bowl. I want to see something that I hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And
also, it adds to the intrigue of the Giants that year of what makes that win as remarkable as it is as a Giants fan, that Super Bowl is forever in 2008. One, the Tyree catch, but you slayed the beast. Like, you were such a giant underdog in that game. So it lends people to push to the other side, but it adds to the intrigue of, can the underdog get it done? But it also shows in a salary cap league how you create dynasties, how important the quarterback position is to everything. It's when you don't have one, you suck. And you can draft as well as you want. You can chase rookie quarterbacks all the time. But if you can't find that position, and if you find that position, you can write in Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes at minimum into the divisional round. But if you don't have one, good luck in getting in the playoffs and getting on the dance floor. You just can't.
I say this as a fan of that team. If there's no Michael Jordan, how many NBA titles does Reggie Miller have? How many does Patrick Ewing have? If there's no Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, a 2-time Super Bowl champ? Is Joe Burrow a champion at this point? Lamar Jackson's a super. I mean, and then you go on the other side of the NFC. Brock Purdy is probably a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? It's amazing how it's almost like the sun of the mass of the solar system, where it all just encompasses around this one person. And I always tell people you're going to miss these days, at least from a cheering standpoint. When you're older, unless it's your team, like you're right, as a Colts fan, you hate the Patriots. As a Pacers fan, no fan of the Bulls dynasty in the 90s. But it's also one of those things you're going to look back on when you're older and go, man, I miss the days of Mike Tyson, and I miss the days of this dominance and this singular entity that was larger than life. And and we talk about this every March, where it was like, about the upsets. Yeah. The ratings for that Mercer David's second round matchup didn't really entice you, right? When Mercer beats Duke, I can't wait and watch him. So it's just everybody cheers for the little guy, but nobody watches the little guy. So anyway, nonetheless, I just want to bring out, just talk about this in a matter of perspective. They're already the team of this decade. The question is now is, and this sounds ridiculous, Kyle, that I'm even saying this out loud, with a win, then the question is, can they track down the Bulls' 6 professional titles in a decade? Can they track down? Nobody's going to track. What was the Celtics, 8 or 7? And I can't believe I'm saying this in 2025, but those discussions come into play.
Yeah,
it's absurd.
Just harder to stay healthy in football. It's harder because you just don't know the health of Patrick Mahomes. Has been hurt in the past already, and he's not as mobile as he used to be. Like, you don't know what. I hope he's healthy and all that stuff because you like greatness, but you just don't know how. It's a fleeting deal, because once Patrick Mahomes is done, it's done. You got to start over, and you're just like the rest of us.
Who's the guy from Portland? Was it Brandon?
Brandon. Yeah.
That dude was 25, and I mean, he was elite, and then knees, boom, over, man. Portland, that just dawned on me. Odin.
Yeah, they had some bad.
I mean, good God. If you have even a slight knee injury, don't go to Portland. All right, Kyle Crooks, this day in sports history really quick before we wrap up, courtesy of Campus USA Credit Union. Put your star power to work in your financial life with Campus USA Credit Union. On this day, 89 years ago, Major League Baseball had their first Hall of Fame class. Can you name one of them?
I'm just going to say like Honus Wagner.
Good guess. And he's in there.
Okay.
Babe Ruth, Christy Matheson, and Honus Wagner. The first ever Hall of Fame class. And look at Kyle Crooks.
I know my baseball.
When I see you again, I'm buying you a Fresca. How about that? So there we go. Kyle Crooks, Seth Harp. Thanks to Zach Rothrock, Shane Matthews, Freddie Weeby, the entire gang. Enjoy your Wednesday. And hey, take it easy. This, by the way, I'll tell you this. ESPN Gainesville, this will be the last night that we don't have a game, or a day that we don't have a sporting event on. I was looking at the calendar until this like random Thursday in April that the Rays don't play. So buckle up, Buckaroos. It's going to be an interesting next 100 days. So Kyle, thanks so much for hopping on today.
Thanks.
Zach Rothrock, Freddie Weeby, the entire gang, Shane Matthews, PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Enjoy your Wednesday. This is Seth Harp, and this has been PodUp with Matthews in the morning.